Like, where did the concept of the calorie come from? And it actually originated, it was in physics and engineering. It had nothing to do with nutrition. But, I take people through that adventure, but eventually we get to this place of like, where did it become so popularized in our culture as this powerful, it's the dominant metric to manage. And it was thanks to a woman named Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters in the earlier part of like the 1900s. And she had a massive bestseller that essentially was regarding the key to the calories, right? And she's really creating this, in a sense, this very powerful paradigm that if you can control calories, you can control your weight. And sidebar for her as well, she struggled with her weight for her entire life. It did not fix her problem, by the way. But here's the thing. So it came into culture and it was telling people, specifically, she's more so speaking to women, that we will no longer eat food. You will now eat calories of food. And from that, you will no longer eat a slice of bread. You'll eat 100 calories of bread. You'll no longer eat a slice of pie. You'll eat 350 calories of pie. So we're changing this very complex, the human body is the most dynamic entity in the known universe. Michio Kaku, theoretical physicist, said the human brain is the most complicated object in the known universe. And we're now taking this very powerful, it's not a calculator with calories. It's really a glorified laboratory and chemistry set and environment. And now we're just saying, if you could do this one thing, you're going to get these results. So that's where
as an example of something I found fascinating, one of the tests I've done was I used a continuous blood glucose monitor for a month. And whenever I would be stressed and like had a conversation that was heated or something like that, my blood sugar would go up. I didn't even eat anything.
Yeah.
It's like an example of how complicated this system is, that there's like a million overlapping things in the body that go, oh, no, you can't just do this one thing and have the other things not matter. So that's the fact that they're trying to use one metric, which I've even thought about the metric of a calorie. Like, how do you calculate it? Right? Like, I know that I think there's some sort of like Bunsen burners program that you put things through and get some kind of metric, right? But I'm like,
that's not what they're doing.
Who decided what a calorie was?
You're right. But they're not doing that today. So it's a bomb calorimeter was what was used initially to disseminate how many calories are in a particular substance. But it was never accurate. It never was, because it didn't account for indigestible parts of food, for example. Basically, to put it into a container that goes inside of another container. It's filled with water. Then you use electrical energy to burn the food, incinerate it, and then you that's what you use to measure how many calories are there. This is the thing. You're not a bomb calorimeter. You're a human being, by the way. Number one. Number two, this is not what's used in counting how many calories are in your food, which is based on the Atwater system, which, again, we could take time and break down all what that means. Basically, they're just doing math. Food manufacturers are just doing math and putting it on the food label. So, but still, it can give us, it's not to say that a calorie can't be a viable tool that we utilize, but we've made the calorie the king of nutrition, and look where it's got us. Mm-hmm. There are going to be some people that are like, well, I've used calorie management and it's helped me. That's great. It's going to help people. But when we make that the dominant thing and ignore what I'm about to share, that's where things go dramatically wrong. And our society's results are sharing that, with 252 million citizens in the United States right now are overweight or obese.
And there's like 320 million in the country.
It's insane. It's like beyond epidemic proportions. And so here's what's going on. So here's a couple of things. These are epicaloric controllers. These are the things that actually control what calories do in your body. All right. So, and I'm so grateful to be able to say this, but and to be able to talk with you about it, because you really understand. But Bruce Lipton was my inspiration for creating the term epicaloric. And so these are controllers above caloric control. These are things that control what calories do in your body. So one of them is your brain and neuroinflammation. Your brain controls what calories do in your body. They have a massive influence on your digestion and assimilation. And so a recent report, and this was published in the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences, and it reported that hypothalamic inflammation. So this is inflammation regarding the hypothalamus that is a integrator of your endocrine system, your hormones, and your nervous system. your neurotransmitters. And so they said that this inflammation in the hypothalamus, which is probably the biggest epidemic happening right now that people don't know about, we'll talk about why, is a double-edged sword in nutritional diseases. The study authors reported that systemic inflammation from things like metabolic dysfunction, right? So diabetes, for example, that issue in and of itself, metabolic dysfunction and excessive body fat leads to brain inflammation. All right. So carrying body fat creates inflammation in the hypothalamus, and inflammation in the hypothalamus creates excessive body fat and metabolic dysfunction. So we get into this vicious circle, and essentially your brain, you have your vagus nerve that's connecting the gut and the brain, for example. And I talk about this in Eat Smart as well. But essentially there's this constant light speed feedback loop with your gut, and that, which is also called the enteric nervous system, or the second brain, because there's like a mass of neural tissue in the gut itself.
There's more, we have more neurotransmitters in our gut than we do in our brain. Is that, am I reporting, is that good information or bad information?
The brain has the most,
okay,
but the second most is found in the gut. Yes. And even the heart as well has its own, we call it a heart brain. There's a significant amount of neurotissue, very similar to what's in the brain in our heart as well. But that's a whole other thing. So here's what happens. So there's this constant feedback loop taking place. And based on the assessment between your brain and your gut on how much energy you have stored in your body, what nutrients you need, your brain can actually signal your gut to shut down the absorption of calories from your food, or increase the absorption of calories from your food. All right. Based on your overall metabolic assessment of what you have in your body. So theoretically, just say you eat 100 calories of something, with the information your brain and your gut has, it can tell your body like, oh, we only need 50 of those calories. And this is not accounted for in conventional caloric management equations that your brain and your gut can literally determine, and dysfunction with them can determine how many calories you're absorbing or not absorbing. And this goes back to hormones with, again, if there's resistance, there's leptin resistance or insulin resistance, and your body thinks that you're starving, even though you've got a tremendous amount of fat stored on your body, right? This is where we can have an increased assimilation of calories from the same food that another person might eat, and they're not even absorbing as much. So that's number one. And I'll just share like two more, but I go through and talk about, really there's 7 of these epicaloric controllers that we identify, but one of them is neuroinflammation. Another one.
How do we reduce it then? Like, can you give us a little some advice, just like for each one of these, what we can do? Because it's one thing to know, it's another thing to have a call to action.
Yes, you're amazing. All right, so this was done by researchers at Auburn University. All right. And this is not an advocacy for what they shared, but the data exists and it's fascinating. So what they discovered was that oleocanthal-rich extra virgin olive oil is able to actually repair the blood-brain barrier and to decrease brain inflammation. All right. And it is what it is, because of the blood-brain barrier is this protective system for the brain. The brain has its own specific diet. We call it neuronutrition. A lot of stuff isn't able to enter the brain, but as the blood-brain barrier is broken down through toxicants, abnormal things that we bring in through our nutrition, stress can break down that blood-brain barrier. And so to help to regenerate and to heal it, funny enough, and again, I wasn't the biggest fan of olive oil, but I was like, that's incredible to be able to have that kind of effect on the brain. Like, that's remarkable. So what the researchers found was 2 to 3 tablespoons a day appears to be very therapeutic in healing and assisting in reducing neuroinflammation. And that's one. I mean, we could spend the whole show.
No, that's great. Just something that people can do. I mean, doesn't the brain feeds off of fat, right? Isn't that one of the things that makes the brain operate so much? The
human brain, it is fat. It's primarily fat. If we're talking about the dry weight, the brain is primarily water, by the way. So we're talking about somewhere in the ballpark of 80% water, which is another solution. If we're talking about inflammation or fire, water would be an important attribute here. But most people in our society are walking around walking around with dehydrated brains. So taking water out of the equation, the brain is primarily fat, but we got to go deeper than that. What kind of fat? Because not all fats are able to actually enter the brain and pass the blood-brain barrier. So cholesterol is one of the primary fats the brain is made of. We've got sphingolipids, another one as well, phospholipids. We've got sphingomyelin. I can go on and break these down. And there's certain foods that provide the building blocks that are able to actually cross the blood-brain barrier.
Is this in Eat Smarter? Is the information in Eat Smarter your book?
Most of it is.
Most of it, okay.
Even in the chapter where we talk about cognitive health and brain health, I couldn't put everything that I know in the data in there, but also I do talk about it on my show quite a bit. Like I got master classes.
Oh yeah.
Just on the fats of the brain.
And sciences and things are always emerging. I mean, that's a beautiful thing about wellness is we just keep learning. So, okay. Yeah. Olive oil, love it. A couple of tablespoons a day will help with the blood-brain barrier and help you with inflammation. Love it.
Yes. So another one of these epicaloric controllers, and this is one of the biggest takeaways from today, because it's affirming something that we might say or a belief that we might carry about nutrition, but now we have solid science to affirm this factor. And another controller of what calories actually do in your body is the type of food itself. So people might say all calories are not created equal. Now we have the data. So this study was published in Food and Nutrition Research, and they set out to find whether or not there's a difference in calories absorbed, assimilated, and metabolic function from eating a meal of whole foods versus a meal of processed foods, right? And so in the experiment, what they used was a whole food sandwich, which again, this is not about whether or not this is the best source of whole foods, but this is what they did. It was a whole food sandwich, which included a whole grain bread and cheddar cheese. And then they had test subjects to consume a processed food sandwich, which was made of white bread and cheese product. Which cheese product, that's what Kraft is, by the way.
What we grew up on.
Yes. So it's not, you can't legally even call it cheese. It's Kraft singles because there's not enough cheese.
It's amazing what our body will be. It's amazing the resilience that our body has, that we can feed it, fruit roll-ups and gushers and, Kraft singles,
golden grams,
goldfish, and
Hot Pockets.
We still grow to be these, we still keep getting taller and we still keep getting smarter. It's really amazing.
The human body is incredibly resilient, to say the least, but just imagine what happens when we really get on the good stuff and what our genes are expecting. And so here's what happened. So they gave folks, to see again, how do calories react in their bodies when eating a meal of whole foods or a meal of processed foods. And so what they discovered was that when the test participants ate the processed food sandwich, they had a 50% reduction in calorie burn after consuming that sandwich versus when they ate the meal of whole foods. Okay. So the processed version of these foods, which were very abnormal, not really anything that the human body can even recognize as food, it created what I call essentially these hormonal clogs that created dysfunction and disruption in the body's processing of those calories, making the body more stingy at hanging on to that caloric energy and not, in a sense, not really knowing what to do with it, versus when they ate the more whole food version of it, it was more efficient in the expenditure of those calories. So truly, the type of food matters. So when we have these different diets, again, they can be effective, but if it's a point system diet, for example, and it's not paying attention to the quality of the food, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And you got to look at even the people who are promoting them, oftentimes they continue to struggle with their weight. And we're just like, oh, whatever. It's my fault. It's my fault I'm not making the point system work for me. It's my fault that I'm not counting the calories adequately enough. Like I gotta cut them more. I gotta cut them harder. I've had patients come in who are eating under 1,000 calories a day, and their weight will not budge.
Hard to do.
We're working with their quote weight loss doctor, and they come in, they're just metabolically broken, and they've created a state of learned helplessness where they think it's their fault, like they're just not trying hard enough.
Yeah,
and not getting this education on here's how your body and your hormones and your organs and your fat loss related processes. Here's how it all works. Let's get you well. Let's heal these systems.